This is Runner, an 80s anime-inspired motorcycle action game with first-person VR driving gameplay from True on Pixel. Let's dive right into what makes this high-octane action game so fun, beginning with its objective and gameplay. The game is set in a futuristic city where you play as a runner, and you're tasked with moving goods while fending off the mega corporations that control the planet and have exploited its citizens. They'll stop at nothing to bring you down, and your only way to fight back is your motorcycle, guns, grenades, and energy sword. Now, the story itself is presented via character dialogue in between missions, and I will point out that the characters are well voice acted, but I wouldn't say the story is anything to write home about necessarily. It does provide a nice backdrop as to why things are the way they are, and I will say it's also a nice touch that it gives you hints towards each stage's bosses and how to deal with them if you're into reading the lore. As for the gameplay itself, well, that's where the game truly shines. With one hand you drive your bike, with the other you pull out a gun, throw a grenade, or bring out your energy sword. Each has its own use case, but primarily you'll be focused on driving and shooting. That said, there will be times where you'll pull out both guns at the same time to slow down time and lay down some serious firepower. The enemy types typically have a different weak point you want to aim at to take out efficiently, and overall there is a decent variety of enemies, some requiring different forms of engagement to actually take them out. Throughout your gameplay, there will be drops that give you different types of ammo, such as a flat cannon or a charge shot. Some of the pickups will also restore your missiles and grenades or change your bike's own weapon system. There's a good amount of variety, and it really does help you to find out which weapon type is the one best suited toward your playstyle. Each stage consists of a track that you have to run through while taking out enemies that ultimately leads you to that stage's boss fight. Each boss fight is unique and honestly quite the spectacle, each one having their own attack pattern that you need to learn to take them out. Now, I do want to point out that the game does have a bit of a learning curve. The second boss in particular was a bit of a skill check for me. But ultimately, once it clicks, the game is actually very fair in its difficulty. My biggest complaint when it comes to the gameplay would have to be the energy sword. While I think it's great for blocking certain shots and also attacking, I do feel it can be a bit inconsistent at times, and it did leave me wishing that it was just a bit stronger. Though I will say it comes in real handy in the last stage of the game. Now let's talk features and content. In total, there are about 7 stages you need to play through. My total playtime from start to completion was about 4 to 4.5 hours, which if you ask me, isn't that bad considering the game is just priced at $14.99, making it one of the cheapest PSVR 2 titles to get. In terms of replayability, other than for score, you can get unlockable bikes throughout the stages, each with their own stats and characteristics, but for the most part, it is all about your own self-improvement. You can customize your bike by choosing 3 colors in between runs. There's also added lore and info for each stage if you choose to read it under Intel. But the feature I want to bring attention to most, and is actually the reason I decided to pick up the game, is the local 2-player mode. While you're in VR blasting away at enemies, somebody else can pick up a DualSense controller and actually control the bike for you. I ended up doing just that with my nephew, and we had a blast trying to communicate with each other on the best strats to take out the enemies and bosses, and it was actually a very fun time. Only until later did we find out that there is a third-person camera option for the one controlling the bike, so we played through most of it through a first-person perspective. Obviously, that made it a lot harder than it should have been, but regardless, plenty of laughs were had, and it's always great to see a feature like this in VR. It helps make VR feel less like a solitary experience without requiring online play. Now for the last section, let's talk visuals and immersion. Runner is by no means a graphics powerhouse, but its art style really does pop in the PSVR 2's headset. The OLED panel really shines with the dark contrast of the environments with the bright neon lights that are zooming by. And I gotta say, they really nailed down the overall 80s anime aesthetic, and let's be real, it looks heavily inspired by Akira. Not a bad thing, by the way, whatsoever. The game overall looks really solid. Each stage brings its own vibe, with my favorite having to be the narrow road surrounded by water and neon lights. I will also say I genuinely like the boss design, not sure about anyone else, but it certainly brought back some Sonic boss battle vibes. But maybe that's just me due to them all being complex robots with their own attack patterns. All that aside, I gotta say it's relatively easy to feel immersed in this style of game as soon as you're on the bike, because the sense of speed you get racing and weaving between traffic while blasting away at enemies is just a lot of fun. The soundtrack and sound effects of the enemies just blend in to make it feel like a high-octane experience, and boss battles, well, they feel intense as they are massive robots you have to go up against with huge scale. Now, taking all of that into account, would I recommend picking up Runner for your PSVR 2? At $14.99? Yes, I think it's actually a pretty great buy if you're looking for an easy to understand experience. Even more so if you dig the overall vibe the game is trying to set with its visuals. Don't get me wrong though, it's not pushing any sort of VR boundaries, but it knows what it is and it does what it does very well. I will admit that it can be a bit of a challenge at the start, but as you start to understand the game's mechanics and when it's best to speed up or slow down, it'll click and then you'll be zooming and blasting away. Not to mention, it's one of the few titles with a 2-player mode option for local play, and that's a very unique addition to any VR title. It may not be a super long game or one with a ton of variety when it comes to the actual gameplay, but as I said, it does what it sets out to do very good. Now, if you have any remaining questions about Runner, leave them down in the comment section below and I'll answer what I can. If there's another PSVR 2 title that you'd like to see me review, leave it down in the comment section below. And if you enjoyed this video or found it helpful at all, be sure to hit that like button as it really does help the channel out, and if you're wanting more content like this, be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell as well. I hope you have a great day, thanks for joining me on this virtual journey, and I'll catch you in the next reality.